Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Off-Farm Income Podcast YouTube channel. Really happy that you're here with us again today. Today, I get to speak with a very enterprising, very interesting entrepreneur named Artem Milinchuk, and he is coming to us from his business, Farm Together. Now, they reached out to me and asked if they could be a guest on the show, and this happens from time to time, and so I looked into their company, and what I'm always looking for when this occurs is, do I think that this particular company could benefit one of you out there in some way in terms of helping you become farmers, get started farming, or maintain and keep your farm. And when I looked into Farm Together and I looked at their business model, what I saw was I thought there might be something out there, something here for one of you out there in terms of doing one of those three things. And my ultimate goal with the show is to give you the ability to either keep farming or to start farming and spend your time on that farm. So certainly today what we're profiling, and we've profiled businesses kind of like this in the past, is a method by which you can get assistance with generating capital, with buying farm ground, and with getting started. We're going to profile that today by talking about Farm Together. We'll talk about a little bit of Artem's journey from Russia to Canada to the United States and his vision for finance and how that is going to relate to agricultural ground in the United States. We'll start that here right now. Artem, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Matt.
Hey, you bet. I really appreciate you and your team reaching out and wanting to be a part of the show and a part of this community. It means a lot when you see value here.
Absolutely. Yeah, we think, farming is super exciting. There's so much changing, so many big trends converging. And, when we heard that you work a lot with kind of farmers looking to sort of new farmers, folks looking to get into farming, I think it's a very exciting times. And I can't remember who, but someone said, farming will be like the next finance job, the next tech job. So definitely really excited to be at the forefront of this movement.
Okay, well, great. Well, what I'd like to do is I'd like to start off the show just by letting our audience kind of get to know who they're listening to really quick. Is that all right with you?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Well, let's start like this. So where are you coming to us from? Where are you sitting right now?
So right now I'm in New York. We're here for a board meeting, also meeting with a number of international and domestic investors who are looking to invest into farming, invest into farmland, support the new emerging trends in farming, like regenerative agriculture, something that thankfully is really coming to the forefront of the conversation with climate change, organic and sustainable farming. So I am in New York right now, but typically we split our time between San Francisco, California, which grows 54% of all fruits and vegetables and majority of tree nuts, and East Coast New York, because that's still where a lot of capital is.
Okay, so you're not necessarily, San Francisco, and when you say New York, are we talking New York City?
We're talking New York City proper, Manhattan, Brooklyn, yep.
All right, so we're not talking areas where we're seeing a lot of wide scope agriculture going on, San Francisco and New York City, but we're talking areas where a lot of decisions are getting made and a lot of things are getting put into play that can ultimately help farming and help agriculture.
That's right. And even, like San Francisco and Bay Area, you have so many almond orchards, for example, that are literally within, 2-3 hour drive from San Francisco. You have vineyards, you have fruits and vegetables, in Salinas. So it's actually amazing how much farmland is close to San Francisco, and you'll have farmers doing sort of remote farming, sitting in the comfort of their home somewhere in the, near the ferry building in San Francisco. Yeah.
I actually grew up down in the San Joaquin Valley, just outside of.
All right, there you go.
Yeah, outside of Modesto. So very familiar with all the different almond orchards and walnuts and grapes and tomatoes and everything that's grown down there in the valley.
Fantastic.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about your history a little bit. So everybody listening is going to want to know what your accent is or where it comes from.
Absolutely. So, I born and raised in Russia, in Moscow, and then I moved to Canada now 12 years ago, and then I moved to United States in 2016. My personal sort of first experience with agriculture was that, when Soviet Union collapsed in 1990, there was a couple of really chaotic years, and our family survived on the potatoes from my grandparents' farm for a winter and two.
Okay.
And we had to do what now would be considered organic agriculture, but we didn't have any pesticides and herbicides. So would 6-year-old me would go the rows of the potatoes and take off all the bugs from the leaves, because we didn't have any money for the fertilizers. But those potatoes tasted pretty good. So that's my early experience with farming.
So in the United States, we would be marketing those potatoes as organically grown, all natural, blah, 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 blah. And in Russia, it's this is just the way we did it, because we didn't have any chemicals or any fertilizers to put on this.
And also it would be technically child labor, so I don't know if it would fly in U.S.
We've got exceptions for that on farms. Yeah, it's not a big deal. Okay, well, that's very interesting. So what made you want to leave Russia? And was Canada your ultimate destination, or was the United States your ultimate destination and you went via
it was
Canada?
more of, I know your listeners might not appreciate this as much, but from outside, Canada and US looks a little bit similar. Same language, same culture broadly, although hockey much bigger in Canada. I think it's just Canada and US, it's such an exciting place to be, and truly, still very much, the American Canadian dream is alive and well, and I'm living it right now. And so it's just being somewhere where one can be in a global environment, and everything's just so big and next level in United States, in Silicon Valley, in farming as well, right? I mean, US has 1/3 of the global farmland market. And so I think that's what really drew me to your part of the world, wanting to be with the best and with kind of the most forward-thinking people on the globe.
And was it agriculture that brought you to the West, or was it something that brought you into agriculture once you reached North America?
So my career before this was mostly in finance, and within finance, my sector focus has always been food, agriculture, farming. So since 2004, I've been in this sector. So when I started Farm Together in 2016, it was really, the one of the motivations was that it is still an industry that is so overlooked by finance and technology. And so I kind of saw it as a natural extension of my skill set in finance and my interest in food and agriculture.
Okay. So you mentioned the name of the business, Farm Together. Why don't you go ahead and explain what that is and how it works?
Yeah, absolutely. The core idea of Farm Together is to do two things. One is to make it easier for people to invest into farmland, and then to make it easier and more profitable for farmers to find farmland to farm, and the farmland that they farm to make sure that they ultimately can make more money on it than just kind of as a standalone operation. I think as Farm Together starts reaching scale and has a lot of properties and farmers on our platform, we can help farmers get access to more and cheaper capital, to help them get better pricing on the inputs, on the outputs, on the technology they use on the platform. There's a number of partnerships that we're exploring with other companies in the business, like Farmers Business Network, and really, sort of taking back a bit more power from the sort of the bigger companies and give it back to the farmer.
Okay. Well, let's start off with how it helps people who want to invest in farming and agriculture. How does it help them? And then we'll move from there into how it helps farmers to be able to farm. Absolutely.
I mean, the short answer is just there are very few platforms out there, very few options for people to invest into farmland, period. There's a couple, public stocks out there. There's some platforms out there that just started, same as us, maybe 1-2 years ago. But by and large, if you want to invest into farmland, you better have, first of all, a lot of capital. A good farmland lot may cost hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars. And then, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. So you want to buy a few pieces of farmland, and then maybe you don't want to keep all your savings in farmland. So if you want to have stocks and bonds as well, then suddenly you're talking about having millions and millions and millions. So just giving people an opportunity to invest into a fractional ownership in a particular farmland lot that is professionally managed by us, that is professionally farmed by hopefully one of your listeners in the future, is something that just makes it very easy. So on our platform, in 5-10 minutes, you can go and buy a piece of an almond orchard, for example, or a cornfield. So that's kind of how it works, yeah, and what the reason sort of to exist.
And so why are investors wanting to add farm ground to their portfolios? What's the motivation there?
Yeah, Matt. I mean, we have this bit of a cheesy saying, but farmland is the oldest asset class, the oldest investment. I mean, really, it's very, I think, intuitively clear to people that farmland has a lot of intrinsic value. People need to eat. The population is growing. The diets are improving. Everyone, in the emerging markets, in the sort of the developing countries, want to live and eat as Americans do. And there's just not enough farmland. In fact, in the last 5 years alone, from 2012 to 2017, date of the last USDA census, I think we lost something like 14 million acres of farmland in the United States. And so farmland supply is decreasing. And so, basic supply and demand, we believe that the price of farmland as well as the income from farmland will go up longer term. And so investors want to add that safe, defensible, long-term financial product to their portfolio.
Okay. So when an investor is looking at agriculture and farmland in their portfolio, this is going under the category of, or the umbrella of maybe slower growth but safer growth. Would that be fair?
Yeah, absolutely. And also less risk to lose your principal, to lose your investment. If you're investing into, let's say, Bitcoin, you might be in for a wild ride. With farmland, and in the last 40 years, farmland return on average, we look at the NCREIF index, about 10%. With volatility, I know I'm getting a little bit in the weeds here, no pun intended, but the risk, the volatility of the investment was a little bit higher than bonds, but much lower than stocks. So overall, it's a safe and stable long-term investment historically.
I missed it. What kind of returns were you saying?
So historically, farmland has done about 10% annually. It sort of goes a bit lower if you're talking about corn, soybean, a little higher if you're talking about almonds. So depending on the type of property, the type of the investment, it might going forward, we think it'll be a little higher, a little lower, but overall you can expect kind of solid returns in the future for the reasons I described above, increasing demand for food and decreasing supply. Okay,
and so where do your investors come in from? And what I mean by that is in terms of the capital they've got on hand to invest. I mean, are we talking about this being an opportunity for people who've got hundreds of thousands of dollars to invest, or are there people coming in with $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000?
Yeah, so because of the way the SEC and the financial industry is regulated, and we're fairly new, it is harder for us right now to make it available to everyone, which we would love to do eventually, maybe in kind of 1-2 years. So for now, it's only for what's called an accredited investor, where the minimum check size does need to be quite high. But we do get investors that are farmers or people familiar with agriculture, with farming, that intuitively and from experience understand the value of farmland. And that would be some of our investors. Other ones are sort of your usual suspects, lawyers, doctors, dentists, and tech entrepreneurs, people like that. But I think, honestly, longer term, I'd love it if every American could own a piece of America, a piece of American farmland. And so it's something that we're definitely working towards, where even for maybe $10 or $20, you could buy a little bit of farmland and start building your portfolio. We think it's a really good investment for people thinking long term, for retirement, for college, things like that. Farmland fits really well.
Now, you talked about the return and how that may vary a little bit from crop to crop. So, for example, from corn to almonds, almonds traditionally, or not traditionally, but over the last decade, we've seen some really high returns when it comes to almonds. So obviously the investment has more to do with just the ground that it's sitting on, but it has to do with the performance of the farmer, the yield, and the price of the commodity that's being sold.
That's right, yes. And we will have a number of different financial products on the platform, a number of different investments to choose from. So if you want something that is low risk, lower return, then it can be like a cornfield with an upfront cash yield, cash rent. What it means is that the farmer actually pays upfront in March. and they take all the risk and also all the upside for the upcoming year, for the harvest and for the planting. On the other side of the spectrum, you can have a crop revenue share on an almond orchard, where if almonds do well, then you make good amount of money. If almonds do poorly, you'll make less. So you can choose and pick and choose what kind of risk you want to take on.
Interesting. So on the upfront investment, the farmer is guaranteeing a certain percentage back to the investor. They get paid that right before the planting season begins, and then
that's right. In like corn, soybean industries, what happens is typically in March, the landowners, and oftentimes it's other farmers or retired families who were farmers not farming anymore, they will put out their property out for rent. And what we found from some of our partners, there's a lot of demand for renting farmland, especially for younger starting farmers. So oftentimes landowners can get as many as 11, 15 bids from farmers looking to rent the farm that year. So demand is really high.
Okay.
And then the farmer will oftentimes pay the whole amount for that year upfront in March, which does suck. It's your capital, kind of, for the farmer paying upfront, which is oftentimes coming back to sort of access. Unfortunately, oftentimes there'll be farmers that already have been in the business for a while. But the beauty for the landowner, for farm together investors, is that all that amount is paid upfront in March, meaning that you, as the landowner for that year, you don't really, you're not really exposed to what happens to that property that year. You might get a drought, you might get flooding, you might get great harvest, you might get a poor harvest. Doesn't matter. You already got all your payment upfront. Yeah. Okay. But then because it's all upfront, the returns will be lower than if you're taking more risk together with the farmer.
Now, when it comes to sharing some of that risk with the farmer and therefore getting some of the reward if they have a good year, how does the investor know that they are getting involved with a farmer with experience, a farmer who knows what they're doing, versus somebody who, say, is new into the game and has to still go through a steep learning curve or something like that?
So we do all that for you. Farm Together takes care of all that.
Okay. So how do you vet the farmers? How do you know
we
that they're
look
qualified?
we look at their track record. Right now, we also looking to partner with other companies that actually do this. There's a company called Tillable that is kind of like an Airbnb for farmland owners, where they will do all that for you. So likely for, like, say, cornfield, we would just call up Tillable and tell them that we have a property for them to take care of, and they will take care of all that. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. All right. Well, let's switch gears and let's talk about how this benefits farmers. So how is this going to help farmers either be able to farm or to stay in farming?
So to answer your second question first, that is a great question. And what we have seen happen is that as an average age of a farm is approaching 60, land gets passed on to the next generation, and you'll have several kids. And what we'll often see is that, let's say the farmer has 3 kids, 2 of them don't want to farm, and then 1 wants to stay on. And then the 2 kids, they want to sell the farm, they want to kind of cash out, they want to, invest into some other business, they might want to, get a down payment for a house or something else. And so right now, there's not a lot of creative options of capital out there. And so what Farm Together, what we want to do is to be able to provide those creative capital solutions where it might be a sort of a long-term loan to the farmer. It might be some sort of other creatively structured solution where we kind of buy out the first two owners, and then the third farmer does like a sale to own for those those 2/3 that we own for now. So there's definitely different ways in which it can be structured, but we're looking, for example, at a 15-acre property right now in Connecticut, so kind of close to New York, where that is exactly the situation. There's one child that does want to farm, and the other 2 don't, and so we're looking at ways that we can help this family stay on the property they have owned now for over 100 years, I believe.
Okay.
So this is still something that we are figuring out, but absolutely a huge gap in the market for being able to get access to that capital. And right now, what we encourage people to do, and we encourage your listeners to do, just get in touch with us. We read all our email, we answer all our phone calls. Tell us about your situation. We will find a way to help you out, or we will introduce you to a network of other people that we have that can provide that capital. Another story that we have that worked out really well, but there was a former Marine who he had an amazing farm. He got hit with a double whammy where he had an illness, and also there was huge rainfalls that year, so he was standing to lose the house and the farm.
Okay.
And he only needed a fairly small amount, 40,000, to kind of keep him going. And the banks just weren't quick enough. So Farm Together was looking to provide him with that short-term loan that would be creatively structured to make sure that he's not put into further debt. But when you looked at the property itself and the farm, I mean, he could have paid that back many times over. Now, thankfully, there was a GoFundMe campaign, and he raised that whole amount just from friends and family, because he was like a sixth-generation farmer. Okay. So that's kind of another, I think, really interesting story out there, and still showing the lack of capital. So we don't have a set solution right now that we can just have a turnkey solution, but we definitely have people here that care about this and that can come up with ways to do it. And then a more streamlined solution for younger farmers looking to get into farming is the properties that we'll have on the platform, and especially more so like in the row crop space. You can reach out to us and you can rent them and farm them. And you mentioned, how do we know that it'll be the right farmer?
Yeah.
There is a number of different programs of mentorships, where sort of the more experienced farmers take on younger farmers, teach them, and then kind of slowly hand off the farm to them. There's also a wide variety of different financial solutions, from grants to nonprofits to federal program, specifically aimed at younger farmers looking to get into farming. We are going to have a huge shortage of farmers, and the federal government and state governments understand it, and they understand that we need to invest into the education. Look, a younger farmer doesn't have 40K, 50K, or 200,000 to buy a farm, right? But we need to make sure that knowledge, that know-how from generation of farmers before this generation doesn't go to waste. We need to pass it on. And so this Farm Together wants to be a kind of focal point of expertise, so that if you're a younger farmer and you come to us and you say, look, help me get into the game, we can connect you with the right resources. This is a program that we plan to roll out closer to 2020. We're young. We wish we could do everything, but we got to prioritize things.
Sure.
But again, we have a variety of partners, especially in California, that we can point you towards. And look, in a way, it's a very small industry. Everyone kind of knows each other, and it's a very friendly industry. I love being in this industry. Food people, ag people are very friendly. So if we can help, Matt, my contacts and our contacts are there. Again, I encourage people to reach out to us. We'd love to help.
Okay. Now, you mentioned how the people there that you're working with and that are partnered with you on this at Farm Together, how invested they are and how much they care about farmers. What's the history of everybody else there? Is everybody else
in Farm Together?
Yeah, are they from farming backgrounds, or what's the story there?
Yeah, so we have several other people on the core team. Our CEO, David Chan, he used to work at Prudential Agriculture. It is an insurance company that invests into farmland in California. Josiah, who is our farmland director, yes, he also worked for a number of years at Prudential. We also have other partners. Nav Athwal, his family has been farming almonds for decades in California. Jay Geroro is our advisor on the row crop side. I mean, his team and him have been investing, working with many farmers in United States. We're really excited. Our board observer is Theo Spearings. He used to be the CEO of Fonterra, which is the largest dairy exporter in the world based in New Zealand. So there's definitely quite a few people on the team, and there's more kind of in the backgrounds that we work with, that are advisors, that are consultants, other farmers out there, everywhere from like West Kansas to Washington to Florida to California. Yeah, it's such a new space, and there's not that many young people yet in the space. And so when you meet someone sort of with our backgrounds, we love kind of talking to them and getting them sort of in our broader network.
Okay. Now, is there a minimum size of a farm for somebody to become to partner with you on this and to generate cash flow through this method?
There's not really minimum size. It's more about economics.
Okay.
The farm needs to be profitable, and that's unfortunately one of the challenges that I think younger farmers face, which is how can they get access to something that has sufficient scale, which is why we think like the rental model makes sense. The rent-to-own model is something that is really interesting. But typically, if we're talking about like tree nuts, it needs to be at least like 20, 40, 60 acres.
Okay.
More so on like the corn, soybean side. That's unfortunately a big barrier, and it's only getting harder and harder every year. But, the farming and the end products, the agricultural product, it's a global industry. US has to compete with Brazil, with Russia, Ukraine, and it's economies of scale do matter. Unfortunately, there's no way to get around it.
Now, if a farmer chooses to come to you and to generate cash flow by engaging in this method, what are they giving up?
So when the farmer comes to us, typically what happens is that the farmers are looking to retire. That's, I think, one of the big examples.
Okay.
But they still want to farm the land for a few years. And so we would do a sale lease back, where the farmer would sell the land to us, cash in straight away, be able to use that money straight away, go travel, help out relatives, help out kids going to college, or invest into other businesses. But then they would still have a contract with us where they still can farm that property for a set number of years. So because they're the ones, they're the best tenant on this property, right?
Yeah.
So they can continue farming it for a number of years. So they would probably give up flexibility on kind of past that period. There's also, you still have to sort of, if it's a lease, you have to pay that lease like kind of the fixed portion. There's a bit of more of that sort of risk. But if you sold the farm, then you have cash to kind of cover that lease. But that would be, I think, like the main downside. The flip side is, I think, with the rental model, what happens is, if you as a farmer have a high return on capital, actually operating more land, right? Because if you don't own every piece of the property, that means that actually you have cash freed up to rent more acreage overall,
Okay.
right? And get potentially higher return on that acreage if it's a good year. That gives you sort of more flexibility and potentially higher return on your capital.
Interesting. So the bulk of the farmers that are involved with you doing this, they are retiring farmers who are they've got kind of a I don't know, they've got their eyes on a moment where they're going to exit farming.
Not the majority right now.
Okay.
But I think, given that the average age of the farm is approaching 60, the expectation is that about half of all farmland will change hands in the next 20 years.
Okay.
We think that will be the majority of the opportunities we will see.
Okay. Now, let's say a 35-year-old farmer comes to you and they need to generate cash flow, but they have no intention of leaving farming for decades to come. How would you work with them?
And when you say generate cash flow, can you expand a little bit on that?
Well, the way I'm understanding this, but maybe I'm misunderstanding it, is that for them, they can offer part of their farm or part of their profits to your investors in exchange for generating some operating capital. Am I misunderstanding that?
Got it. No. So I think, I understand your question. That would be, I'm trying to think. Typically, one thing that we're looking for is to give our investors exposure in the price appreciation of the land value. So in this scenario, what we could do is to do like a sale leaseback where the farmer could buy back the property in like 5-10 years at sort of predetermined price. But the more common case that we have seen is farmers farming already, and this could be this 35-year-old farmer. They see a property going up for sale. They don't have yet the money to buy that property, but they want to farm it, and they want to have clarity and predictability on that property. So they might come to us and say, look, there's a property that I know is going for sale. I actually think I can get you guys a good price because I know the neighbor, they know me well, but you need to commit to renting it out to me for the next 10, 20 years and then giving me the first right to buy it at some sort of price that is maybe, 3% per year appreciation or something like that. And that is actually something that we have seen inbound interest quite often.
Okay, got it. So your investors are actually wanting to own a piece of that ground and ultimately farm together through your investors. You're going to be owning that farm ground and leasing it out.
It's not that we want to own it. We want to have exposure in the price movement of the land. We'd like to, if the land price goes up, we'd like to participate in that. If there's other ways to do it, we'd love to do it. There's new models emerging in Silicon Valley in New York where the same is happening for single-family housing, where you want to buy a house, you don't have enough money for a down payment. A company will come in and invest into the down payment with you. So you still take on the usual mortgage, but they also help you with the down payment. But then you sort of paying the mortgage and also you sort of paying out that down payment in the next 5 to 10 years. Or if you sell that house in the 5 to 10 years, you don't pay back the down payment, but you actually share the profit with the down payment company. And so let's say if a farmer wants to buy a property but they want to sell it in 10 years, we could participate in that where we help them buy that property and then we split the profit from the sale of that farm in 10 years. That could be an option. Like Matt, like I said, we're still new. We're only roughly 2 years old, so we're definitely flexible. And what we want to do at the end of the day is find ways to work with farmers, especially this 35-year-old farmer. They sound very innovative. They sound very aggressive and ambitious. So whoever this person is, we'd love to meet them.
All right, very good. Well, Artem, I want to ask you, because I'm getting ready to wrap up, but is there anything that you wanted to make sure my listeners knew about when it comes to Farm Together before we finish up the interview?
We're here to stay. We're here for the long term. We're here to help young farmers navigate the financial aspects, the ag tech aspects as well. We are here to help think through what are some of the kind of more attractive, more specialty differentiated crops to farm, whether it's organic farming, whether it's regenerative farming that I think is becoming really, really hot and interesting. We're here to help you. So if your listeners would like to reach out to us, learn more, get connected to the industry, especially, given the geographical nature, if it's in California, then, we'd love to help. And then for some of your more well-off listeners, farmland is an attractive, stable, long-term investment, and we'd love to help you diversify your portfolio into this asset class. So, check us out as well here. And it's all people behind the sort of the fancy website. So please reach out. We're here 24/7 to talk and to help.
Great. Well, one other question that popped into my head as you were saying that is you've mentioned organic and regenerative a couple of times. Is the reason that keeps coming up, is that because it's a value-based thing for Farm Together, or is that because you're seeing an upside in terms of profitability in those two sectors?
It's both. And the thing is that those two things are becoming more and more connected, and it's driven by demand from, the Gen Z that now wants its food to come from sustainable sources. They want to know that it's at least not harming the environment and ideally helping the environment. And so, you're seeing companies starting to pay more and more attention to that, whether it's General Mills having committed to source, I believe they want to have at least 1 million acres of their supply chain come from sustainable regenerative agriculture. Organic, honestly, I mean, it just tastes better. I know it's way more expensive, but it just tastes better as well, and that's why you see people paying high price for that. So it's as much about our values as it is about value, no pun intended, in those operations. Yeah.
But ultimately, you are seeing an increasing demand for food that is produced in that manner.
Not just increasing demand, but insatiable demand. I mean, we get investors that say we only want to invest in regenerative farmland. Like, don't bring us anything else. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
I understand that being in New York and San Francisco, we're kind of seeing those very
right.
very rich tech entrepreneurs and people buying like $10-15 a pound produce.
Right.
Trust me, I cannot afford most of that myself. But it is starting to get more and more affordable. There's a lot of technologies going into making it more affordable. And also, look, our agriculture, the beauty of U.S. agriculture, it is global. And the labels we have for organic, they are trusted globally. So we're seeing demand for that from, affluent European consumers, Japanese consumers, Chinese consumers, right? We have a lot of trust globally. Our agriculture has done a tremendous job in promoting the various U.S. brands, whether it's almonds, whether it's apples, to the global market. And I think we should capitalize on that. The almond board has done a phenomenal job there. So, absolutely, I would encourage you listeners to take a look into kind of the more innovative, the more cutting-edge types of produce and types of farming out there.
Well, the reason I'm asking about that is the ultimate goal with this show is for somebody out there who wants to farm to be able to find a way to make that happen, and ultimately to be able to stay on that farm. And if it's a niche like this where we're seeing a high demand, and for the farmer, it may be a value-based, it may be economic-based, or it may be a combination of the two. But if it can help them to get into and succeed in farming, we're looking to give people that information.
Yeah, absolutely. And likewise, I also wanted to make an ask from your listeners, if there's people that do help farmers get into farming, if there's people working for the government, for nonprofits that are looking to integrate and build partnerships with companies like ours. Likewise, please reach out. At the end of the day, there's one thing that we know for sure: if there's no farmer to farm your land is worthless.
Yeah, that's right.
So I can talk all day long about the intrinsic value of farmland, but it is worth zero without a farmer to farm it. So your listeners are the future.
All right. Well, Artem, if people want more information, they want to reach out to you, they want to connect, what's the best way for them to do that?
So info@farmtogether.com. Our phone number is on the website, and also reach out to me personally, Artem. I know it's a little bit hard to spell, but A is in Apple, R is in Romeo, T is in Tango, A is in Echo, M is in Michael, at farmtogether.com.
Okay. Thank you so much for reaching out. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much, Matt.
And helping our listeners. Really appreciate it, Artem.
Thank you very much. Yeah, have a great day. Cheers.
Well, thank you for joining me, everybody. I hope that was helpful to you. Certainly, I only will profile a company if I think there could be some benefit to you for accomplishing your farming goals, and I certainly hope that we reached one of you with a solution that is going to help you make it in farming and in agriculture. So, everybody, as always, enjoy your journey to the ultimate lifestyle business, agriculture.